You wake before the sun crests the Levant Sea. The cold air, thick with the scent of salt and damp earth, moves against your skin. It is a coolness that promises renewal, carrying the whisper of distant tides even before you step outside. You do not need an alarm, the subtle shift in light, or the specific chorus of the early morning birds tells you it is time. Slipping out of your sleeping mat, your bare feet meet the cool stone floor of your dwelling. The house has absorbed the night's chill, and this coolness settles into your bones, a gentle reminder of the natural world that surrounds your craft. You move slowly through the small space, taking stock of the few necessary things for the day. Your movements are practiced and economical. Every gesture has been repeated hundreds of times, shaping them into a quiet efficiency. You wash your hands in the cistern, the water shocking cool against tired skin, washing away only the last vestiges of sleep. As you rinse your forearms, you notice the tiny flakes of white sea salt clinging to your skin, and the faint residue of alkaline soap used yesterday. These scents, salt, mineral tang, are the true perfumes of your life. You gather your simple tunic and wrap yourself in a sturdy outer cloak. The fabric, woven from local flax, feels rough and familiar against your skin. Dressing is not an act of preparation for work so much as a slow acclimatization to the rhythm of existence itself. You pause at the threshold, standing between the dim interior and the gathering light outside. The world beyond the small doorway is already beginning its awakening. The air smells distinct now. There is the sharp tang of salt water mixed with the sweeter, greener scent of wet vegetation from the wild groves nearby. Below you, if you look out toward the crescent curve of the bay, the fishing boats are starting to stir. They bob gently in the sheltered cove, their wood darkened by brine and sunlight alike. You watch this movement, noting how each little boat rides a slightly different rhythm against the subtle push and pull of the tides. This gentle rocking is a constant soundtrack to your life. The ground beneath your feet, as you walk toward the edge of the wild grove that backs onto your workshop yard, is soft with moisture. You notice the damp moss clinging to the roots of the olive trees, its deep green almost black in the early light. This small detail, the velvety texture of the moss, is a momentary pause, an observation that grounds you firmly in place. These coastal groves are not merely scenery, they are your pantry, your pharmacy, and your source of life. You walk along a narrow path where the earth gives way to the gradual slope toward the water. The light is still soft, diffused by the humidity of the morning air. It catches the dew clinging to the broad leaves of fig saplings, making them sparkle with ephemeral brilliance. Each leaf seems to hold a tiny piece of captured dawn. As you pass near the tide line, you stop. You do not immediately search for materials first. You simply breathe deeply. The air tastes intensely of salt and iodine, a potent cocktail that feels cleansing in your lungs. You listen past the whisper of the wind through the leaves to catch the distinct sounds of the day's awakening life. The occasional cry of a gull circling overhead, the muffled splash as a piece of flotsam washes onto the sand, the soft, repetitive clinking of small shells being dragged by the retreating tide. The early morning light begins its slow crawl across the surface of the sea. You watch this transition, noticing how the deep blue near the horizon gradually bleeds into softer shades of lavender and rose further out. This immense, slow-motion spectacle makes your own life feel intensely focused in contrast, a careful, deliberate craft against a backdrop of elemental power. Your focus slowly narrows from the vast seascape to the immediate ground beneath your feet. You begin the quiet process of moving through the coastal scrubland that borders the grove. This is not foraging yet, it is simply observing what is. You notice the way the sun, though still low, begins to warm the grit on the sand and lift a faint haze from the water. You observe the structure of the wild growth, thorny bushes, sturdy Mediterranean shrubs, and grasses that cling desperately to life between rock and soil. When you finally reach the edge where human habitation meets the natural landscape, your attention settles on the small collections of discarded material, scraped bark, fallen leaves, tiny bits of bone washed up by the tide. These appear unremarkable to an outsider, yet to you, they are fragments of potential. They carry the quiet history of the coast and hold the possibility of color. This sense of reverence for the overlooked details becomes a foundational part of your morning ritual. It is a meditative act that tells you everything you need to know about what the day will bring. The air remains cool, even as the sun begins its slow ascent from the far edge of the Levant Sea. You carry the residue of the dawn with you, a lingering saltiness that clings to your skin and the rough-spun cloth at your waist. Before turning inland toward the shelter of the city walls, you continue along the tidal margin, where the dry earth gives way to scattered scrubland. Your pace is deliberate, a slow rhythm established over many years of following the ebb and flow of tides and the needs of dye. You move among low-lying bushes and sturdy grasses that root themselves in the alkaline soil, paying attention not just to what you need, but also to the silent language of the place. You focus first on the rocky fringes. Here, where the largest waves break, life clings fiercely to the edges. You are looking for small shells, tiny nodules, and resilient limpets that have been scrubbed clean by the turning waters. Kneeling slowly beside a rock face, you examine the exposed tidal pools. The water here is shallow, crystal clear enough to reveal every grain of sand and every minute ripple in the mud beneath. You gently sift your fingers through the wet grit, searching for the specific iridescent mollusk whose liquor provides crucial bases for deep blues or foundational tones for purples. Their shells are surprisingly light when dry, papery in texture, but while submerged, they feel solid, cold, and deeply resonant with the sea's life cycle. Observing these small creatures requires a patience that slows your internal clock considerably. You watch how the current pulls tiny bits of kelp into miniature whirlpools, spinning them slowly before depositing them against the wet stone. The scent here is complex. Iodine from the rocks, the sharp green tang of salt, and the earthy smell of decaying mangrove roots further up the coast. This mixture of smells tells you exactly what microclimate sustains certain organisms. You continue your crawl along the tide line. Higher up, where the ground is dry and dusty, the plant material becomes more varied. You are searching for leaves, broad-leafed varieties with deep veins that hold concentrated pigments. Some roots, tough and woody, must be harvested carefully, ensuring you never sever a whole clump or disturb the soil structure unnecessarily. These plants thrive in the nutrient-poor ground near the sea's spray, drawing their strength from the constant interaction between freshwater runoff and saltwater intrusion. At one point, you stop beside a cluster of low-growing shrubs with small, waxy leaves. You run your hand lightly over the smooth surface of the foliage. The leaves are slightly dull green, almost blue in the reflected morning light, a color distinct from the vibrant green of inland forest growth. These specific plants contain pigments that react wonderfully when combined with certain mineral fixatives later on. You gather handfuls of them, placing them into woven baskets alongside thicker roots you carefully pry up near the low tide mark. The weight of these materials in your basket feels both modest and incredibly valuable. The process itself is a quiet ritual. Every collection must be mindful. You know that taking too much from one patch depletes it for others, maintaining the balance of life along this sacred strip of land. Your movements are economical. You bend, gather, observe, stand up, repeat. The slow passage allows your mind to wander into cycles of memory and technique, recalling how the specific blend of leaves and roots will behave when faced with a boiling alkaline wash, or how long it might take for the true potential color to fully emerge. Further along, you find patches of seaweed clinging tightly to dark gray rocks. Not all is useful. Some are too brittle, others too mucilaginous. But certain varieties provide deep tannins and subtle browns that act as excellent preparatory base layers, or can be mixed into complex blends for earthy tones. You separate these sea-harvested materials with painstaking care, grouping similar textures together in your basket. The effort of sorting the sea detritus requires a level of focus that is meditative, grounding you entirely in the immediate physical task. The morning progresses slowly, marked only by the subtle shift in light and the gradual increase in heat. You find yourself pausing near an old copse where wild olive trees grow close to the shore. The scattered leaves shed here are brittle and carry a scent different from the others, a faint, metallic sweet aroma mixed with salt. These fallen leaves, though they require careful processing, hold pigments that enrich the final bath colors in ways that only local knowledge can predict. You realize how deeply intertwined your skill is with the geography surrounding you. You are not simply harvesting plants. You are interpreting a detailed biological map written by millennia of coastal existence. The Mediterranean coast near Tyre offers an unparalleled palette of resources, each requiring a specific rhythm of collection and handling. When your basket begins to feel heavy and full, a careful mixture of leafy matter, woody roots, brittle seaweed, and iridescent mollusks, you turn your back on the receding tide. You follow the faint path that leads you away from the wet scrubland, toward the relative shelter where the earth is firmer and more amenable to transport. The sheer volume of gathered material signals a successful morning's labor, but also the immense undertaking of what lies ahead, transforming this raw, diverse haul into stable, breathtaking hues. The slow accumulation of materials serves as a physical representation of patience, the essential virtue required for your craft. You notice the subtle stain on your fingers and forearms from handling the wet sea detritus. It is an unavoidable marker of your life, a testament to the depth and permanence of color that defines your work. You carry the gathered roots and scrub leaves back to the workshop, your steps having settled into a comfortable rhythm with the shifting sand underfoot. The morning's work, from the damp coolness of the coastal path, moves you toward the heart of the building, the dye house. Here, the air is different. It carries the deep, earthen scent of wood smoke mixed with something mineral and alkaline. Everything in this room speaks of slow chemistry. Massive terracotta vats arranged in orderly rows, their surfaces chalked white from years of leaching salts. You move into the designated preparation area. The first task is always setting the stage for color to emerge. This requires the alkalinity, the basic solution that will coax and hold the pigments you gathered yesterday. You kneel beside a large vat, inspecting its interior coating. It is not merely an empty container. It is a vessel seasoned by countless cycles of boiling and chemistry, etched with subtle stains from every dye ever set within it. The initial raw material for this phase is wood ash. You reach out, drawing upon the knowledge ingrained in your hands, the specific types of burned scrub brush that yield the purest, most effective lye. The ash itself is a delicate powder, gray-white, yet inherently powerful, containing the necessary minerals to raise the pH level within the water. Handling it, you notice the way the fine grains settle through your fingers, cool and slightly abrasive against the skin. You begin the process of mixing. Scoop by scoop, you add the ash into a deep wooden trough that feeds the main vat. Water is drawn from nearby containers, not just fresh spring water, but water that has been allowed to sit and mature in cisterns, taking on the subtle mineral tang of local limestone. The mixture begins slowly. It does not bubble dramatically, rather, it absorbs the solids with a quiet, rising heat, you stir the slurry deliberately, using a long wooden paddle that feels heavy and worn. With every circular motion, you are replicating an ancient chemical ritual, the controlled genesis of alkaline conditions necessary for dye uptake. The process requires patience, a mindful repetition that anchors your body in the present moment. As the mixture grows more cohesive, you observe its texture. It moves past mere liquid to something slightly viscous, carrying suspended particles of ash and dissolved salts. You pause, leaning on the handle of the paddle, just breathing in the smell, a sharp, clean mineral scent that promises transformation. This foundation is not merely a base. It is the chemical scaffold upon which every brilliant hue will eventually rest. The next phase involves boiling the plant matter you collected, the roots and leaves intended to yield color. These materials are already placed into separate, smaller vats reserved for primary extraction. You do not add them all at once. The process must be measured, understanding which parts release their essence most readily when stimulated by heat. You begin adding water to these root vats. The plant material sinks initially, densely packed and darkly colored. Then, as the water level rises, they gradually open, releasing a profound sense of organic weight. You watch the steam rise, smelling the different essences beginning to bloom. A faintly sweet aroma from one variety of leaf, mingled with the sharper, almost peppery scent of another root. The heat must be regulated constantly. Too low, and the extraction will take days, weakening the potency. Too high, and you risk burning out volatile compounds, leaving behind only bitter residue. You feel the necessity of this careful balance, like tending a fire that must burn with steady, persistent warmth rather than wild bursts. After an hour of gentle simmering in these smaller vessels, you draw attention to the color changing within them. The initial water is a translucent, pale hue, almost colorless. Gradually, as minerals and pigments dissolve into the liquid matrix under heat, the water deepens. You observe small, incremental shifts. First, a faint chartreuse tint appearing near the surface, then deepening slightly towards olive green, or perhaps the start of a muted indigo wash from certain berries. These smaller vats are your laboratories, miniature crucibles where the raw earth gifts its potential to human understanding. Each drip of color into the water is an equation solved by millennia of trial and error, stored in the accumulated wisdom of the artisans before you. Once the initial extraction from the plant matter is robust, the desired saturation achieved, you must integrate this rich liquid into the main alkaline bath. This step requires utmost caution. The concentrated dyes are potent. They can react violently if not mixed correctly with the already saturated lye solution. You do not pour directly. Instead, you guide a measure of the deeply colored infusion from one vat to another, stirring slowly and methodically at the junction point. The confluence happens in slow motion, where the rich organic pigment meets the mineral base. There is a moment of visible change, a subtle brightening, a deepening saturation that suggests stable molecular bonding. You feel the satisfying weight of creation. You are building potential color, transforming fragile natural matter into durable, magnificent hues capable of lasting centuries. The air in the dye house now feels thicker, weighted by steam and possibility. The smell is complex, mineral sharpness melding with damp earth and cooked plant life, an intensely aromatic blend unique to this place at this time of day. You notice the terracotta floor tiles under your feet, cool and uneven, absorbing the warmth radiating from the boiling vats. They speak of permanence, anchoring the ephemeral act of dyeing into the solid rhythm of daily labor. The entire ritual, from the ash preparation to the slow mingling of extracts, is an exercise in respect for time, respecting the hours required for leaching, the heat needed for extraction, and the necessary patience before brilliance can appear. You stand back slightly, hands resting on your hips, allowing your gaze to take in the array of bubbling solutions. Each vat holds not just liquid, but concentrated potential. Reds waiting in the amber-toned vats, deep purples simmering beside hints of saffron yellow. It is a quiet, meditative portrait of human ingenuity, cooperating with natural chemistry. This preparation phase requires you to move slowly, knowing that haste will ruin the careful balance achieved here, making all this fragrant effort into nothing but muddy water. You breathe in deeply, letting the rhythmic hiss of the steam steady your breathing, and settle into the profound rhythm of the dye worker's art. The simmering liquid in the vats has settled into a thick, slow-moving silence. You stand near the cool mouth of the largest vessel, observing the surface tension where different pigments meet. The aroma is heavy and complex, smelling faintly of wood smoke, wet earth, and something metallic, like distant rain on hot stone. Everything you touch today must interact with these base solutions, and understanding that interaction is paramount to your trade. You scoop up a small amount of liquid into your palm. It feels surprisingly warm, clinging to your skin for a moment before evaporating into the cool air. Before this bath, there was the deep pool of plant extraction, the rich yellows from saffron roots, the blues hinted at by scrub leaves, and the strong reds from various barks. But color does not simply exist in a leaf or a root. It must be anchored. It needs something that will bind it forever to the fiber that drinks it up. This is where Mordants come into your careful focus. They are not dyes themselves, but rather allies, chemical intermediaries that facilitate the marriage between the pigment and the wool, the linen, or the silk. You move slowly toward a collection of small, labeled wooden trays. On these trays are carefully sorted minerals, pale yellowish crystalline powders, deep charcoal flakes, and lumps of rust-colored earth gathered from specific coastal deposits. These materials represent both alchemy and meticulous observation. You pick up a pinch of alum. The crystalline dust catches the faint shafts of sunlight filtering through the oiled fabric stretched over the ceiling rafters. It is sharp and bright against your thumb. You recall the teachings passed down from your grandmother, how these salts change the very nature of color, turning dull browns into vibrant ochres or muddy greens into startling emeralds. The careful process requires you to understand which mineral reacts best with which natural tannin found in the plant material. If too much iron is introduced at the wrong time, a magnificent purple might turn an unintended, flat blackness. This knowledge demands more than mere craft. It requires the steady hand of a scientist and the patient mind of an artisan. Next, your focus shifts to the preparation for setting the color using alum. You scoop out fresh water into a smaller, dedicated basin. The water must be clean, filtered through linen cloths multiple times, lest impurities upset the delicate balance you are seeking. Into this measured water, you carefully drop the alum crystals. They do not dissolve instantly. They appear suspended, shimmering slightly before finally yielding their structure to the liquid. Watching that slow dissolution is a deeply meditative act. It reminds you of how gradual and persistent change can be, how even the strongest pigment needs time and precise chemistry to reach its full potential. You begin creating several small test batches on a flat slab of polished stone near the vats. You take a minuscule amount of undyed wool fiber and dip it into a solution containing only the alum mordant first. The wet wool darkens slightly, becoming more receptive, more open in texture. This is simply preparing the canvas, making it ready to accept the pigment's bond. The importance of this pretreatment cannot be overstated. A bare fiber rejects color. An alkali-treated, mordanted fiber accepts and holds onto it with a tenacious grip. You gently test a piece of linen, noting how the material swells slightly in the alkaline bath before you lift it out. Its weave pattern remains visible, but its readiness is palpable, a quiet eagerness for the coming dyes. The smell of the alum solution is surprisingly clean, almost sharp and faintly salty, a scent of raw earth meeting purified water. It carries nothing of the deep funk of fermentation or the mustiness of the roots. It is pure chemistry in its purest aromatic form. You think about the history contained within this process, the dye masters who came before you, working with limited tools but profound knowledge, achieving colors that still defy belief, those imperial Tyrian purples. Their success relied on exactly this careful handling of natural chemistry. As you work through several different ratios and concentrations, mixing small quantities into separate basins, the rhythm settles around you. The dip, the pause, the scrape of the wooden paddle against the stone, the quiet inspection of the resulting liquid color. It is a cycle of building foundational chemical understanding before the final act of saturation can occur. Your movements become slower, more deliberate. You are not just mixing powders and liquids, you are following an ancient language written in mineral interactions. Each batch represents a careful conversation between human intention and geological endowment. The earth provides the raw materials, the alum from deep mines, the iron from coastal deposits, and your knowledge guides them into forming beauty. When these individual mordant baths are prepared, each one representing a different chemical potential, you feel a deeper understanding of the relationship between fixative and color. The depth achieved in the final dye bath is not just about mixing plant material. It is about ensuring that nothing slips away at the first washing or fades under the Mediterranean sun. It is about permanence. The cool stone beneath your hands feels grounding, contrasting sharply with the warmth rising from the simmering vats beside you. You pause and look out a high window opening, seeing only glimpses of blue sky between roof tiles. The light there seems clean, undiluted, a reminder that even in this enclosed workshop, nature's immense power is always filtering through. The methodical work continues, adding small adjustments of mineral salts to deepen or shift the potential hue. You are building a chemical scaffold, a framework of adherence strong enough to hold the magnificent dyes forever, allowing your future creations to reflect the permanence and enduring value of Tyre itself. It is an intricate study in patience, recognizing that true depth, whether of color or knowledge, is achieved slowly, through countless careful measurements and quiet repetitions. The work of the vats, the rich, earthy scents rising from the simmering solutions, has settled around you. You pause for a moment, letting your senses recalibrate after the intense chemistry of mordanting. Everything smells deeply of minerals and damp wood smoke, a complex aroma that is simply part of life here in Tyre. You turn your attention from the glowing, semi-translucent liquid to the stacked bales awaiting transformation. These are the raw fibers, the linen cloth, perhaps, or the local wool harvested by others, but destined for your specialized hands. They rest upon woven mats, piled high enough that their natural scent mixes with the lingering steam. You approach the stack slowly, feeling the weight of the task ahead. This raw material is not merely fiber, it is a canvas, a blank slate waiting to drink in the deep secrets you have worked so hard to extract and fix. Its initial color, the muted off-white or pale cream, is striking against the dark wooden floorboards of the workshop. The first step requires gentleness. You select one bale, its edges slightly frayed from time and movement. Running your hands across the surface, you feel the uneven nap of the wool, the distinct crosshatch pattern of the linen weave beneath your fingertips. Each strand speaks silently of the sheep that grazed in the hills, or the careful hand that spun the flax under the coastal breeze. These fibers, as they are, hold nothing fully. They are porous and receptive, but also vulnerable. before they can accept the permanence of the Tyrian purple or the subtle indigo derived from distant sources. They must be prepared, cleansed, opened up, made perfectly ready to receive the deep hues. The heat of the day settles around you, a warm thickness carried by the gentle sea breeze. You have finished your meticulous work in the workshop. The heavy vats are settling, their contents cooling to room temperature, carrying the ghost scent of crushed roots and mineral salts. The intense focus required for the chemical processes has worn off, leaving you with a deep, low-grade fatigue that feels more satisfying than tiring. You gather your tools, stacking the wooden implements used for stirring and scraping against the stone bench. The movement is practiced, economical. Every piece has its place after use, much like knowledge in your mind has its proper container. The urge to simply step away from the contained world of earth, ash, and fiber becomes strong. You walk slowly, following the winding passage that leads from the workshop area toward the central heart of Tyre, the marketplace. It is mid-morning now, far enough past dawn's quiet intimacy that the town has fully stirred into motion. The air changes as you leave the semi-enclosed space of the workshop. The smells become sharper, more chaotic. The cool, damp scent of your working materials gives way to a blend of roasting grains, strong spices, unwashed bodies, and the underlying salinity of the Mediterranean. The passageways leading into the market are narrow, shaded by rough-hewn stone buildings that lean close together, creating tunnels of shifting light and deep shadow. You adjust your pace, allowing your awareness to expand beyond the immediate task at hand. You walk not with destination, but with observation itself as a purpose. Your eyes begin to catalog the sensory input, absorbing the rhythm of human life. The first thing that captures your attention is sound. It is not a single noise, but a complex weave, the rhythmic clinking of pottery being stacked high on a cart, the shouted counts of a fruit seller advertising his bounty, the low, melodic murmur of voices bartering over goods, and beneath it all, the constant, steady lapping whisper of water against the distant seawall. These sounds are layered, demanding quiet attention to distinguish what is essential and what is merely noise. You pause near the main artery of the market. Here, life spills out onto open ground, forming a vibrant eddy of commerce. You do not stop to buy or sell. You are here simply as an observer, a silent piece of the landscape itself. Your gaze travels across the stalls, absorbing the sheer variety of things humanity has made and consumed. The goods displayed tell stories of long journeys. There are bolts of cloth dyed with colors far removed from Tyre, deep crimson hues suggesting distant desert sources, pale yellows hinting at Mediterranean fields, and greens that might come from imported jungle leaves. You notice the stiffness of the textiles, how they catch the sunlight in ways that speak to their weave, the quality of the dye already worked into them. These foreign colors are fascinating contrasts to the rich, deep purples and blues you create, reminding you of the vast network of trade that keeps your specialized craft relevant. Nearby, a merchant sells exotic spices piled high on woven mats. You lean slightly closer, allowing the aroma to wash over you, cinnamon sharp and sweet, cumin dry and earthy, black peppercorns intensely pungent, hinting at steaming distant lands. The sheer concentrated potency of these smells speaks volumes about the lengths people go to trade for sensory pleasure. Further into the crowd, the human element dominates your focus. You watch a small group gathering to drink water from an open basin. Their gestures are graceful and unhurried, the way they cup their hands beneath the stream, the quiet exchange of glances, the slow drawing in of breath. These simple acts reveal the underlying needs and rituals that underpin all commerce. You move past stalls selling cured fish, noticing how the drying process has intensified their scent into something metallic and sharp. Beside them are baskets filled with freshly picked vegetables, deep purple figs stacked beside bright yellow melons, and bunches of resilient green herbs that cling to the wicker walls. The vibrancy here is overwhelming, but you filter it through the lens of your own profession, color permanence. You study how the deep jewel tones of certain spices maintain their saturation even under harsh sunlight, or how the vibrant pigments used in the pottery glaze resist fading across time. It is a continuous meditation on endurance. Much like the dye you work with, the rhythm of the market itself becomes a kind of temporal marker for you. As one wave of shoppers passes, perhaps butchers hauling their wares, making splatters of deep reddish brown onto the worn paving stones, it gives way to another. Water carriers dragging heavy amphorae down the slope. Each movement dictates a temporary change in the flow, forcing the surrounding energy to adapt and settle again into its accustomed pace. You find yourself drawn momentarily to a corner where a weaver sits on a low stool, quietly mending fishing nets. The act is repetitive, almost hypnotic. He works with fine, resilient twine of faded blue and green. You observe the subtle tension in his fingers, the concentration etched around his eyes. This simple repair, this small focus on breakage and reconnection, resonates deeply with your own craft, the way that every dye bath requires perfect balance, how even a single loose thread or insufficiently fixed pigment can ruin the entire length of fabric. The marketplace is loud, busy, full of sharp edges and unexpected intensity. Yet, for you, it serves as an unintentional demonstration of color theory in action. You see the natural dyes incorporated into everyday life, the dusty ochres mixed with mud for plastering walls, the faded blues lingering on fishing nets, repaired countless times, the vibrant pigments used to paint vessels destined for far-off ports. You feel a quiet sense of connection here, though you are physically separated by hundreds of moving bodies. Your specialized knowledge is not confined to the workshop's smoky enclosure. It touches everything. The deep indigo needed to stain the merchant's traveling robes, the earthy brown necessary to finish the amphory carrying olive oil. The dye masters are invisible consultants on every facet of trade. After a long stretch of quiet observation, you feel the steady pull back toward the relative calm of your quarters and workshop area. You take one last deep breath, pulling in the complex bouquet of smoke, spice, and salt that defines the city at its zenith. This sensory memory will accompany you back to your task. The sounds of bartering and creaking carts become a backdrop as you walk away from the main thoroughfare. The residual energy of the crowd settles into a deep sense of purpose within you. You are not just a dyer. You are positioned at the nexus where the natural world's palette meets human aspiration, creating permanence out of fleeting plant life and mineral grit. The quiet ritual of observation has refreshed your internal clock, reminding you that the deep colors awaiting you in the vats are part of a larger, thriving system, a constant exchange of goods, knowledge, and enduring color across vast Mediterranean distances. The day's heat urges a return to the cool, controlled environment of the workshop, ready now not just with skill, but with a clearer understanding of the market's endless demands. The deep, residual sense of the workshop cling to you, a complex blend of alkali, wood smoke, and dried plant matter. You are accustomed to this smell now, a third scent along with salt and sea brine, the aroma of creation and conservation. Everything in this life, even what seems wasteful, must be seen as having inherent value, a potential locked within its structure. You begin by observing the cooling vats. The deep indigo dye bath, cooled from the heat of yesterday's extraction, sits quietly, reflecting the dim light filtering through the oiled parchment windows. You note how some liquid puddles near the floor drain the runoff that carries away unreacted pigment and spent mordants. These are not simply mess. They are residues, miniature concentrations of time and labor. You start with the draining boards, examining the slurry left from rinsing the initial plant harvests. Some bits of root end upon these wooden surfaces, having surrendered their color to the main vats in a milky discharge. You do not sweep them into the discard pile. Instead, you carefully gather them, treating each piece like a fragment of recorded history. When dealing with dye, waste is merely potential that has not yet found its appropriate form. This understanding dictates your movement through the workshop. Every shell casing, every dried husk from the grove, every spent mineral residue holds a hidden geometry or stain waiting to be rediscovered. You are learning the poetry of efficiency in this ancient life. Your attention drifts first to the shells. The mollusks collected at low tide have yielded their luminous purple color to the massive baths. However, you notice the empty casings, the nacreous, spiral remnants left behind by the creatures. These delicate shells are not suitable for further dye work in large quantities, but they possess remarkable properties when used as small fillers or decorative accents. You rinse them gently in a separate basin of cool seawater and sort them, keeping only the most intact spirals for smaller, more delicate projects. You also turn your gaze to the remnants of the alum bath. After fixing the main batch of wool, the liquid becomes lighter, slightly cloudy, with spent mineral salts. Instead of letting this rinse down the drain, you collect it in a shallow earthenware bowl. This weak, salty solution is invaluable for cleaning tools and preparing small batches of accent material later on. Moving to the drying racks, where scraps of dyed fabric hang like silent declarations of color, you find small splatters of potent dyes, little accidents that formed while trimming or bundling. A deep reddish stain might have marked a corner, or a streak of pale blue could cling to a wooden plank. You gather these fragments meticulously, separating them by hue and approximate purity. They become your emergency palette. You then address the husks. Perhaps you collected pods of wild plants or dried seed casings from riverside scrub. After their internal pigments were boiled out, the outer shells remain dry, brittle, and remarkably stain-resistant. You test these small pieces by pressing them against damp cloth to see if they retain any natural tint or texture useful for minor crafts. These become materials for household sealing or padding, keeping your fingers occupied when the major vats are resting. The process is less about immediate use and more about material cataloging. You are building a storehouse of secondary resources. You remember that true mastery in this trade does not merely involve creating something beautiful, but sustaining the practice itself. It requires an almost spiritual dedication to nothing being wasted. You find yourself spending time sorting through bundles of dried scrub leaves that were too damaged or soiled to contribute fully to the main vat washes. These smaller pieces are often discarded simply because they cannot withstand the boiling process. Instead, you dry them further, crushing them into a fine, aromatic powder. This powder is not used for primary color, but can be mixed with oils and natural resins later on, acting as a subtle pigment binder or filler for paints intended for small wooden carvings or pottery decoration. The scent of this collected material, the mix of dried earth, crushed shells, woody smoke, and mineral salt, is distinctly different from the fresh vigor of the dye baths. It is the quiet, patient smell of endurance. You observe how the local fauna also provide overlooked resources. Little slivers of bone washed up by the tide, or the durable sinew left on driftwood, are collected with the same care as a root. These items might not stain richly themselves, but they can be treated chemically to take on color later, offering structure and durability alongside the vibrancy you create. This entire cycle of reclamation demands a different kind of attention than the active boiling. It is meditative labor, a slow, repetitive sorting that keeps your hands busy while your mind engages in classification and assessment. You learn to read the subtle differences between a merely stained object and one with residual potential pigment, a distinction that separates the novice artisan from the master. You carefully clean your tools used for waste processing. Small wooden ladles, rinsing basins, and sorting trays. Each item is wiped down using the weak alkaline rinse water, ensuring they are clean enough to hold their acquired residue safely until needed. The simple act of cleaning becomes a reaffirmation of process. The cycle must be closed, every vessel cleared, every surface accounted for. The rhythmic patter of damp hands sorting material against the smooth wood floor is perhaps the most predictable sound in your day. It anchors you to the workshop and to this place in time. You consider how profoundly connected this life is to natural cycles. The tide leaves shells, plants grow and decay, dyes leach out, leaving behind usable residue. Your craft mirrors the ocean itself, always returning matter to a stable equilibrium. You settle down near the edge of your processing area, cross-legged, surrounded by your collected materials, the shining empty shells, the reddish stains on cloth scraps, the finely ground leaf powder. You take a moment simply to breathe in the rich history of color surrounding you, acknowledging that true wealth here is not what is consumed, but how little is permitted to pass away unused. The light shifts slowly, painting the western sky with washes of diluted apricot and lavender. You have spent the day moving through cycles of heat and cool, from the brine-damp groves to the steaming alkaline vats. Now, as the sun begins its slow descent over the vast expanse of the Mediterranean, a different kind of energy settles upon you. It is a quiet energy, marked by stillness and the deep satisfaction of work well done. You turn your attention first to the heart of the workshop, the array of large earthenware vats that hold the day's liquid secrets. They are cooling now, their internal temperature dropping from boiling steam to a deep, humid warmth. You move slowly among them, brushing away any dust or dried residue that has settled on the terracotta rims. Each vat holds a different memory of the day's processes. Some retain the thick, smoky viscosity of spent alum solutions. Others carry the rich, almost black stain of root extracts, and still others hold the vibrant, ghostly blush of crushed mollusks. You do not lift or stir anything. The principle of this late hour is observation alone. You find a spot on the packed earth floor beside the largest vat, settling down with a quiet weight that suggests both fatigue and contemplation. Your senses begin to shift their focus from labor to deep sensory reception. The cooling vats do not simply hold liquid, they hold time itself, crystallized through repetitive physical action and chemical understanding. The air here is thick, scented with a layered complexity. The mineral tang of evaporated lye mingling with the sweet, earthy musk of spent plant matter. There is also an undertone of sea salt, carried by the cooling evening breeze that occasionally drifts in from the open coast. You inhale deeply, recognizing the signature scent of Tyre's craft, a blend of earth, brine, and chemistry. You run your fingertips lightly over the cool stone floor beneath you, noting the slight grit under your nails. This tactile awareness grounds you, connecting the deep, intellectual work done in these vats back down to the physical reality of the ground upon which you stand. The task now is one of quiet guardianship. You are not actively dyeing cloth, rather, you are observing the results of what has already happened, the patience required for permanence, the delicate balance between nature's yield and human will. You pick up a woven piece of linen that was treated earlier in the day. It catches the oblique light filtering through the high workshop windows. You hold it gently, turning it over your fingers, examining the way the newly fixed color has settled into the weave. The hue is deep, saturated purple, but close inspection reveals subtle variations. Where the warp threads cross, the purple shifts slightly toward violet near the edge, washed by a little residual steam. It appears almost blue-black. These differences speak not of imperfection, but of the subtle chemistry of life and material interaction. This constant, nuanced observation forces you to slow down your breathing. You learn that haste is an enemy of color, just as it is an enemy of good memory. The beauty lies in the gradations, the tiny shifts in tone that only careful examination reveals. Across the room, bundles of prepared fibers, wool, and linen remnants rest on woven mats. They have each received their specific bath, some bathed lightly in the fainter blues from ground lappy's imitation, others stained a warmer red-brown from local barks. You consider the amount of knowledge embodied in these seemingly simple piles. To successfully coax this particular shade, you had to know exactly which roots were active that season, how strong the lye needed to be before the wash, and precisely how long the slow simmer must last, all dictated by the changing chemistry of both the earth and the tide. The knowledge required is immense, forming a deep repository within your bones. It connects the rhythm of the calendar to the flow of the sea. When the stars are brightest, certain mollusks begin their life cycle. When the rains fall at a specific time, the barks yield their deepest pigment. Your craft is not just artistry, it is an almanac written in color. As twilight deepens further, casting long shadows that stretch from the drying racks across the floor, you allow your gaze to drift back to the vats. You watch the reflection of the darkening sky on the oily surface of one vat, a murky mirror reflecting the whole cycle of your existence. The dye, in its liquid state, holds the memory of every light and shadow endured that day. You settle beside the cooler solutions, pulling a simple stool closer. There is no need for conversation here, only for quiet witnessing. You contemplate the concept of permanence, Why do you strive so hard to fix these colors? Not just because they are valuable trade goods, but because color itself seems ephemeral. The sky shifts, the tide moves, even the most vibrant pigments can fade with salt and sun. Yet, through careful process, the Mordants embrace, the repeated alkali washes, the patient vigil at dawn, until dusk, you grant them a kind of temporary immortality. The repetitive nature of your labor becomes meditative. The constant dipping, mixing, stirring, observing these acts quiet the internal chatter of the mind. You are attuned to small sounds, the occasional soft drip from an overflowing bucket, the whispery clink of cooled clay pots being nudged together, the rhythmic lapping sound that finally manages to carry even up to the sheltered workshop yard. You smooth your hands over the rough wood surface nearby, feeling the ingrained grit and polish of centuries of human labor. This deep history surrounds you, an invisible current passing through the very stones. You understand that each fold of cloth awaiting treatment, every careful stain of liquid, is not just a commodity. It is physical evidence of Phoenician ingenuity, the ability to take fleeting natural beauty and make it lasting, structured, and tradable across vast distances. As darkness gathers its cloak over the coastal groves outside, pulling the sounds of the market into a hush, your focus tightens again. You survey the remaining materials, a few handfuls of roots still awaiting drying, buckets needing to be washed out until they shine dull gray, tools that must be scrubbed clean so their residues do not contaminate tomorrow's delicate starts. This meticulous winding down is as crucial as the early dawn work itself. It is preparation for rest, and through that rest, preparation for renewal. You finally rise, your muscles protesting softly with the deep ache of a day spent moving with intention. You gather a cloth to wipe stray spills from the floor near the drying racks. The cool, damp feel of the fabric against your palms is soothing. You take one last look at the cooling vats. They are silent now, holding their secrets close until the sun rises again to wake them up with new tides and a fresh wash of possibility. Tomorrow, the entire cycle will begin anew. The quiet awakening, the foraging, the simmering, the careful fixating. And you will be here, ready for the methodical dance between human hand and natural color. Air cools as the sun finally dips below the western hills. You know this shift in temperature intimately. It is a physical weight settling upon the skin, carrying with it the cool dampness of the Mediterranean night approaching. The deep, earthy scent that has permeated your clothing all day begins to soften, mixing now with the sharper, saltier aroma of the cooling sea breeze. It feels like coming home after long hours of intense concentration. You perform the final rites of the workshop. You systematically cover the great earthen vats, which still hold residual warmth and complex odors. The faint metallic tang of the mordants mixed with the deep, sweet musk of the setting lie bath. You do not want them to cool too rapidly, for even in rest, they retain heat and potential. Your movements are economical and practiced. Every scoop of ash, every placement of a woven mat speaks of years spent mastering this single corner of existence. The wooden tools, the stirring rods, the wide scoops, the careful brushes are gently washed out with water that you draw sparingly from a stone cistern. You observe the residue, pale ochre dust mixed with minute, iridescent flakes of mollusk shell, catching the last faint pink light filtering through the high windows. The methodical cleaning is itself a meditation. Each rinsed basin and polished piece of wood affirms your mastery over this material world. It reminds you that even what appears to be waste, the leftover sediment at the bottom of a vat, is merely potential, awaiting the next dawn's infusion of heat or chemistry. You turn your attention to the day's finished goods. The bolts of cloth, now deepened by the magic of chemical binding and simmering patience, are stacked neatly. You run your fingers over the saturated surface of the Tyrian purple sections. It is a color that seems not merely applied, but contained. It looks as if liquid twilight has been woven into fiber form. It absorbs the low light without flashing too brightly, holding its immense depth in quiet dignity. You spend a moment kneeling before them, noticing how the deep violet hue changes slightly depending on whether you view it from above or from an angle, catching a minuscule ripple of blue-black at the fold. This subtle shifting is what marks true quality, not uniform boldness, but dimensional life. You touch the fabric gently, feeling its weighty softness and the stiffness provided by the fixatives that made it permanent. Gathering your last materials, a damp rag, a basket for the specialized roots you might need to dry tomorrow, small wooden weights for securing the cooling baskets, you begin the slow walk away from the workshop. The sounds of the city are beginning to settle into their nightly rhythm. The distant bleating of sheep moving down the slope, the muffled clatter of ceramic pots being secured in homes, and the steady, rhythmic lapping of waves against the harbor wall. The scent profile changes with every step. You leave the concentrated, chemical aroma of the vats, the strong alkaline earth smell mixed with iodine traces, and walk instead into the cooler, more organic scents of the residential district. Cooking smoke from braziers, damp olives being stored in earthenware jars, and the sweeter, warmer musk of humanity settling down for the night. You pass through narrow alleyways where terracotta pots spill over with fragrant herbs, bay laurel and dried thyme. You notice how even here, amidst human clutter and daily life, color persists, the bright green sheen of fresh leaves contrasting against the faded pastel walls, or the rich brown of drying figs hanging from a low beam. This walk is a slowing down. The pace forces your breathing to equalize with the rhythm of the city's settling heartbeats. You feel the coolness creeping up your legs and ankles as you walk along worn stone pathways, polished smooth by centuries of sandals. Your senses take in minute details. The way moonlight now reflects off slick patches on the flagstones, the quiet companionship of the moths fluttering against the window panes, the deep satisfaction of a day's focused effort. The labor is done, but the experience remains woven into your being. The knowledge you possess, the secret understanding of how certain minerals react to alkaline baths, or how the sap from a specific coastal plant must be heated for just 3 hours to release its maximum dye potential. It settles deep within your memory. It is not merely craft. It is an accrued wisdom passed down through hands and observation. As you reach the outer edge of your quarter, the density of human activity thins out further. The only persistent sounds are now the sea itself and the gentle whisper of the wind passing through the palm fronds near your dwelling. These natural rhythms become a soothing counterpoint to the purposeful chaos of the day. You find your simple room quiet and cool, protected from the rising tide air. You gently shed the outer tunic you wore for the dyeing process. It still carries faint traces, the elusive lavender depth of the purple, the greenish wash of the alum baths, the dry dust of the ash. These smells are part of your life now, like the scent of salt or wood smoke. You settle by your simple cot and allow the deep exhaustion to gather in your limbs. You do not count the hours, but you feel the shift from twilight exhaustion into the profound stillness of true nightfall. The world outside continues its cycles. The tides breathe. The moon casts a silver path over the distant waves, and the stars begin their slow unveiling across the dark canvas overhead. Lying down, your thoughts do not spiral with drama or fear. They simply catalog the day's achievements. You review the subtle gradient of color you achieved today, comparing it mentally to the perfect deep midnight tone required for the queen's robes. You remember the feeling of the simmering water against your forearms, the delicate weight of the raw wool awaiting its final transformation. These moments are cataloged with the same meticulous care as inventorying expensive natural pigments. The sheer permanence of your craft, the ability to capture the ephemeral brilliance of nature and fix it into solid, wearable form, is a quiet comfort. It is a history held in thread and stain. You breathe deeply, drawing the cooler night air deep into your lungs, feeling the last echoes of the day's aromas slowly dissipate until only the clean, sharp smell of salt remains. Your mind drifts toward sleep, anchored by the steady, peaceful knowledge that tomorrow, with the dawn, the cycle will begin again.